I had the news on, and I was scrolling on Facebook, and I saw her post saying, is anybody else having trouble voting?
I got a text from Chief Dean Owen in Pekanjigum, and he said, hey, Tanya, we don't have a polling station.
My youngest daughter, she went down to vote up in Red Lake, and they told her that she couldn't vote, that she was supposed to be voting in Ear Falls.
There were still people in the community that should have voted, and they were denied that privilege, that right and privilege to vote.
I don't think it's sufficient enough to say, well, it was a snap summer election. We're here in cottage country.
Well, that shouldn't even happen. I shouldn't be begging for help from the returning officer to help the First Nation communities.
Well, what do you do about it? What do we do about it? Do we allow them to vote again? I mean, it changes the outlook, doesn't it? And it's troubling.
In 1960, those deemed status Indians gained the right to vote in Canada. Previously, they could only become enfranchised and allowed to vote by giving up their Indian status. And 61 years after the Elections Act was changed to allow First Nations people to participate in federal elections, some in the Kenora riding are speaking out about barriers that stop them from voting in the 2021 federal election. Kenora is the westernmost federal riding in Ontario, somewhat sparsely populated, with a number of communities to the north that are fly-in, such as Poplar Hill, Pekanjigum, and Cat Lake. But more on those places later. First, we're headed just up the road from Vermilion Bay to Wabauskang First Nation. Hi, Angie.
How are you?
Fine, how are you doing?
I'm good.
Good. Angie Pettiquan is the health director at Wabauskang, and that has something to do with why she was eager to vote in this election. We spoke with Pettiquan about that, with her granddaughter around too.
Oh yeah, I was following this election because PC and Liberals were tied, almost tied all the way. So I wanted to go vote.
And what kinds of issues were you thinking about in that lead-up period?
The health care, mostly, I guess. I'm a health director, so I was very worried about the healthcare system. I heard if one party got in that it was going to turn into privatization of healthcare, and I don't know if it was rumors, but I was scared, so I wanted to go vote.
Election Day, September 20th, was a busy one for Pettiquan. She'd been to Dryden in the morning, and she had thought she was going to be voting just up the highway from Wabauskang, in Ear Falls, where she'd voted before.
I went to town and did a few errands, had an oil change too, I think, and then came rushing back because I wanted to go vote. And then I grabbed the cards and I told my son, okay, let's go vote in Ear Falls if we can. And then I looked on my card and it said Slate Falls, First Nation.
Slight problem. Slate Falls is about a 6-hour drive away from Wabauskang, and to add to the confusion, Angie Pettiquan's son lives with her in Wabauskang, but his voter information card directed him somewhere else.
Yeah, he would have had to go to Vermilion Bay, which is 45 minutes if you're pressing the metal. And 45 minutes back, and I already came from Dryden, so I was too tired to go all the way over there.
And so with her card directing her to travel for most of the day to exercise her right, and her son's card sending them in a different direction, the Petequans gave up and didn't vote.
Yeah, I felt really disappointed, and I felt like I didn't matter or whatever. And like, this is Canada, right? Everybody should be able to vote wherever. It shouldn't have to matter what it says on the card.
After speaking with Angie Petequan, I ran into someone else in the community who had similar issues.
My name is Della Van Wynen. I'm a counselor here at Wabascang First Nation.
When Van Wynen's family headed out to vote, they also ran into the same sort of confused messaging.
When we went to the senior center to vote in Vermilion Bay, we told them that we also received my youngest daughter's voter's card, and she was supposed to vote in Vermilion Bay. And so we told them that she was working and living in Red Lake, and could she go and vote in Red Lake? And they told us, oh yeah, no problem, she can go and vote over there. So when she went down to vote up in Red Lake, and they told her that she couldn't vote, that she was supposed to be voting in Ear Falls, which is about 45 minutes from Red Lake. So she wasn't able to vote. And then my mother, she went up to Ear Falls to vote, which is a half an hour from Wabascang, and they told her that she couldn't vote in Ear Falls, that she was supposed to vote in Vermilion Bay at the senior center. So, and I mean, she's 82 years old. She doesn't drive anymore. She wasn't about to turn around and go all the way back to Vermilion Bay to vote. It's pretty crappy. It was, well, it was a waste of their time, really,
Van Wynen hasn't taken any action over what happened to her daughter and mother. But Angie Petequan discovered her experience wasn't unique as soon as she logged onto Facebook the eve of the election.
I was scrolling on Facebook that evening after elections closed, or the polling closed, and I was scrolling. I had the news on, and I was scrolling on Facebook, and I saw her post saying, anybody else had trouble? Is anybody else having trouble voting?
Petequan's friend Tanya Cameron had put out the call, and she was in a unique position to see exactly how the election had gone awry in the Kenora riding.
My name is Tanya Cameron, and I was the NDP's Indigenous Get Out the Vote coordinator in the last federal election.
Working for the NDP, here she is putting up a sign with her son, Cameron isn't supposed to be helping Elections Canada do their job, but that's what happened.
The first call was from Murray Affleck from the local returning office, and he said, "Hi Tanya, sorry to bother you, but we really need help. We're trying to connect with this one community and haven't been able to. If we don't connect with them, they won't have a polling station." That was White Dog. That was Wabascang. And I said, okay, I'll message right away. And is there any other communities? And he says, well, yes, there is. There's Wasagimas Bay and there's Grassy Narrows. We aren't able to connect with leadership there to set up the polling location and identify the poll workers. He said, we have training over the next couple of days, so we need to bring those people in to come and get the training. So I immediately started messaging the chiefs. By the end of that day, 2 of the polling stations and workers were identified in Wasagimas Bay and Wabascang. There was a little bit more dialogue with Grassy Narrows, and that was set up by the following day. So it was pretty quick, and I did tell Murray, it's not a bother if it means helping to make sure that our First Nations get a vote. I don't mind. Just go ahead and call.
But it was more troubling developments that ultimately resulted in Cameron putting her concerns in writing, in a report she sent to Elections Canada.
For me, it was concerns about disenfranchisement of First Nations voters. In other words, voter suppression. It was I was really, really upset by what happened and what I learned on election day. Enough so that I had to take a week to form that letter, and I'd keep going back to it because I didn't want to be so angry, but I was just disappointed, disgusted.
Much of what Cameron detailed in her letter unfolded on Election Day.
Hello, Tanya speaking.
First came messages about First Nations communities without polling stations.
I got a text from Chief Dean Owen in Pekanjigum, and he said, "Hey Tanya, we don't have a polling station." And I was like, "What?" I said, "Oh my goodness, what's going on?" He said, "Well, we did request an advance vote, but you know, we'd like a polling station."
In total, 3 First Nations communities didn't get polling stations on Election Day: Poplar Hill, Pekanjigum, and Cat Lake, ostensibly because they'd had advanced polls. And then came the call Cameron took from a worker at a polling station in a First Nations community, who was apparently more comfortable with dealing with Cameron than with her bosses at Elections Canada.
So she called on FaceTime or Facebook Messenger video and just said, "What do I do at the end of when it's done at 8:30? Where do I send this information?" And I said, "Well, there should be a number you have to call in the poll results." "Well, I don't know where to call." "Okay, I'm going to call the returning officer right away, and I'll call you right back." I said, "Thank you." So I called, and he was like, "Well, we provided that information in her training." "Okay, well, she's not sure, so that's why she's asking. She wants to do her job right, so she's asking for the number." "Well, it was on a big orange paper in their kit." "Okay, well, she still doesn't see it. So can you please just give me the number so I can give it to her so she could do her job?" And it's like, "Well, I don't have it memorized. I'll call you right back." I'm like, what the heck is going on?
Cameron found that interaction with Elections Canada particularly maddening.
That shouldn't even happen. I shouldn't be begging for help from the returning officer to help the First Nation communities. That should just be something that, you know, for anyone in a job, you should be passionate about the work that you do, because it has a huge impact on our country, on our region, on who sits in the House of Commons on our behalf. And, you know, if I'm pestering you to do your job, then I'm sorry, you know, like, but I'm not sorry as well, because do your job.
Coming right up, the chief of Cat Lake says his people have come to expect discrimination in all its forms.
To them, it's really nothing new. And they're so used to this because, you know, for the last 150 or so years, it's been the same thing over and over.
So she's compiling all these people are, you know, calling her and telling her what she experienced or what they experienced. So how did it happen that 3 First Nations communities in the federal riding of Kenora didn't have polling stations on Election Day? Russell Wesley is chief at Cat Lake, and we caught up with him in downtown Winnipeg where he was attending meetings. I asked Chief Wesley how it came to be that his reserve didn't have a polling station on Election Day.
Far north remote communities during September and October have what they call traditional weeks, and most communities empty out their reserves to maintain their language, their culture, and they host these activities to promote their cultural and traditions. So they go out on the land to their trap lines, their homelands.
So Cat Lake asked Elections Canada to allow them to have an advanced poll. And according to Wesley, Elections Canada took some convincing.
After much lobbying effort by myself, our Ontario provincial MPP, Saul Mamakwa, letter writing campaigns, we were able to convince the Elections Canada director.
But what Wesley says he was not aware of was that having the advanced poll meant no poll on Election Day. And what does this all add up to for Wesley?
I think it was really transparent with how the federal government treats Indigenous peoples. We're not, we're inconsequential. they rarely ever come to us unless there's something that needs to be exploited, and that's the time that they approach us for something that they need.
Chief Wesley says there were, in fact, consequences.
Although we had advanced polls, there were still people in the community that should have voted, and they were denied that privilege, that right and privilege to vote, to decide on who their government is going to be. And that didn't happen.
And some in Cat Lake blamed Chief Wesley.
They were certainly unhappy. I heard a lot about it, especially from the 35 and under group. They were very vocal about it.
Elections Canada confirms that as well as Cat Lake, Pekanjicum and Poplar Hill also had an advance poll, but no poll on Election Day. APTN Investigates reached out to the 3 candidates who got the most votes in the Kenora riding. We didn't hear from the winner, the incumbent, the Conservative Party's Eric Malillo, but we did meet with the Liberals' David Bruno as well as the NDP's Janine Seymour.
My name is David Bruno. I work in cybersecurity most of my adult life.
Bruno, who came in third with almost 4,800 votes, was surprised that an agency like Elections Canada had these kinds of issues.
One of the things that I've realized living across the globe is that one of the unique things that I like about Canada is having an independent body, Elections Canada, taking care of the vote and not the provinces themselves, like they do in the United States. So with that, you'd think that there is a high level of professionalism that these sort of things are taken care of because this agency has done it so many times. So when I found out that there were these sort of anomalies, the first question was, well, how did that happen? Why did it happen?
Bruno even goes as far as to raise the possibility of a do-over.
What do we do about it? Do we allow them to vote again? I mean, it changes the outlook, doesn't it? And it's troubling.
Bonjour, Mijakwan Go, Makwan Dundam, Wajashkinigam Dunji, Janine Seymour Dishnakaz. My name is Janine Seymour, and I was the NDP candidate for the Kenora area riding in the fall federal 2021 election.
And as connected as she is to the region's Indigenous communities, the NDP's Janine Seymour emphasizes the hurt an election run like this one can cause.
I think the chief from Cat Lake who put it like Canada is putting a knife in our back and twisting it. And that community had 10 children who vanished from residential schools, and it's incredibly painful to hear how of insignificance, little importance Indigenous people are, especially the ones up north.
And she's not willing to cut Elections Canada much slack.
You really need to accommodate people, especially at this day of age, and what's happening and the awareness that's coming with the impacts of residential school and having a group of peoples who have only received the right to vote in recent times, whereas before you were enfranchised and you lost your status. And so there needs to be a greater effort, especially locally. And I don't think it's sufficient enough to say, well, it was a snap summer election. We're here in cottage country, right? Like, I sympathize with Elections Canada, but that's insufficient in my opinion.
And so what does Elections Canada have to say about what happened in Kenora in 2021?
Hi, my name is Lisa Drouillard, and I'm Director of Field Governance and Personnel Support for Elections Canada.
I asked Drouillard about the investigation they are in the midst of conducting.
Yes, we've heard from a number of different sources that there were gaps in voter services, and in particular that in 3 communities there was a no poll that was available on election day. But being able to count on having a poll on election day is our minimum standard of service. This is a fairly complex case. There's a lot of different sides to the story and some communications breakdowns. So we really need to hear from everyone and all the different parties involved in this to determine what happened and to make sure it doesn't happen again, because this is something we take really seriously, and we always really sincerely apologize anytime there's a voter who wants to vote on their election day and can't do it or has a hard time doing it.
And in terms of the 3 communities with no polls on Election Day, Poplar Hill, Pekanjicum, and Cat Lake, I asked Drouillard whether these communities had been told that by opting for the advance poll, they wouldn't be getting a poll on September 20th.
That's the real nub of the further digging that we have to do, Christopher, because clearly we do have a very clear message that went out from the returning officer to the candidates that made it very clear that that was the arrangement that he made with the chiefs, that it was going to be on the advance poll day and not on election day. But what is clear, and what is something that we can't see again, is that clearly not everyone in the community was engaged around any decision to have a voting day on one day rather than another. And also there's a difficulty in managing who's responsible for communicating this. In general, Elections Canada wants to communicate with everyone in all of these communities. But in small fly-in communities, we do really rely heavily on internal communications, etc., to get the word out.
And about the issue of voter identification cards sending people from Wabasgang to vote in communities some distance away, Elections Canada tells us, we were able to find 5 electors who, according to their data source, should be located in the community of Wabasgang 21. However, in the information contained in the National Register of Electors, they were associated with streets located in different communities. This led to them being geocoded in different polling divisions and therefore to polling places that were further away, up to 6 hours away from their house. This shouldn't have happened, and we apologize to those electors.
I never want another First Nation to wake up, First Nations person living in a community to wake up fully expecting you to vote, show up, and then there's nothing there. I don't ever want that to happen to any First Nation in Canada.
As of this broadcast, Elections Canada is still working on its investigation into what happened in the Kenora riding, and when it's done, Tanya Cameron won't likely be dropping the cause. In fact, she's wanting to get even more involved.
Elections Canada, please hire me. And if I could get a role within Elections Canada, I'd love it. If I could be the Kenora returning officer, I'd love that. Because they do have within the returning office Indigenous liaison sort of role. I don't think that's enough. I think we need First Nations people working in that Elections Canada returning office. If the poll workers don't even feel comfortable asking their boss for information, they'd rather go through me to get that information for them, then there's a problem. If a chief would rather message me that they don't have a polling station than instead of Elections Canada, then there's a problem. And if I'm experiencing a condescending attitude when there's an urgency for that information, then there's a problem. I'm ready to take a step back from partisan politics if it means that I can help the First Nations people get out to vote on election day, help them do their jobs as poll workers, engage the voter, then I would rather do that.